Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to look at Exodus 3 and 4, the call of Moses. Now, this is a really neat scene because this is where Moses encounters God in the burning bush, when God actually talks to Moses, which I think a lot of us would like. We would like God to be obvious when God calls us. One of the things to notice in this scene, though, is that when God calls Moses, Moses refuses. A lot of times we think that people in the Bible just always listened to God, that they always did what God wanted. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people do listen to God and just obey without question. Abraham did that when God called him. The fishermen by the Sea of Galilee just dropped everything when Jesus called them. So sometimes it does happen that people just go with God, no questions asked. A lot of times, though, there are questions asked. There is a refusal of the call. And this is a famous motif that shows up in literature all around the world, this refusal of the call. Here we see it play out with Moses. But why is God calling Moses to begin with? Remember, the people of Israel are slaves in Egypt. And, of course, that's not so good. So they're crying out to God for help. God hears their call, hears their prayer, and then calls Moses to do something about it. Moses doesn't want to help. He gives a few different excuses. His first one is simply, why me? Why did you pick me instead of somebody else? God basically tells him, don't worry, I'll be with you. Then Moses says, well, what if they ask me, who's this God who called you? Right? Why should we listen to you? Who gives you the authority to help us here? What should I say? This is when God reveals God's name to Moses. Moses still isn't convinced. And he basically asks God to do some tricks just to prove that God is who God says God is. So God tells Moses to throw his staff on the ground and it becomes a snake. God tells Moses to put his hand inside his coat and pull it out and it has leprosy. He puts it back in and pulls it out and it's clean again. You would think that by now Moses would start to be convinced that this is actually God who's calling him. And maybe he is convinced of that. But he still has one more excuse. He says, I'm not a good speaker. Now, it's not clear if that means he stutters or if he's just not eloquent with words. Regardless, Moses thinks that this is a really good reason why God shouldn't call him. God should call somebody who's a much better speaker than Moses is. At least Moses thinks. But God doesn't listen to any of Moses' excuses. When God calls you, God doesn't listen to any of your excuses either. And I know that can sound really scary, like there's no way to get out of this when God calls you. But think of it this way. God is calling you to do this thing. God didn't call somebody else to lead the people out of Egypt. God called Moses. And yes, Moses didn't quite understand that at first, but God promised to be with him. God knew that God could do something remarkable through Moses. And God knows that God can do something remarkable through you. It can be really easy to come up with excuses, to think that you're not qualified, to think that God should call somebody else, all of this nonsense. But God knows that God can do something great through you for the sake of the world. To find out what that is, you just listen to what God is calling you to do. God didn't give Moses a big plan for everything that was going to happen. God just told Moses, lead the people out of Egypt and I will be with you. Very simple, but very hard at the same time. regardless of what God is calling you to do, remember that God goes with you and God will give you the strength to do it. There's your 5-minute Bible study for today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.